when I applied, I had, some people say good luck, but you don't really want to win. And I was thinking, wow, this is a strange comment. And maybe it was, about some of the, the challenges that came with, popping your head up and being, more visual in that role.
Welcome to episode 2 of Unearthed special series tracking the evolution and impact of AgriFuture's Rural Women's Award, which is this year celebrating its 25th birthday. I'm Michael Thompson, and to get things going, I'm going to revisit the story so far. It wasn't until the late 1970s that women began enrolling to study a Bachelor of Agriculture at university, and it wasn't until the 1990s that the Australian census would allow women to describe their profession as farmer. After witnessing too many women contributing from the shadows, it was the women of the ABC's rural team in Queensland who kick-started the first Rural Women's Award in the 1990s, and it had an immediate impact. AgriFutures, or RIDIC as it was then known, came on board in 2000 and has developed the award to be Australia's most recognised and valued honour for women in agriculture. But while it's made rural women more visible, the winners of the award will tell you that it hasn't all been plain sailing. And in this episode, we find out how their networks help them to overcome the burdens of newfound fame.
Expectations around the award in terms of public speaking and making the most of the award were certainly high. There was a lot of pressure attached to doing that.
Meet Dr. Mary Retallick. Mary is an internationally recognised viticulturalist, and back in 2012 she was awarded both the South Australian and National Rural Women's Award.
I really struggled in my career through until probably my mid-30s to really develop strong networks. And I was really determined that other women coming, after me, didn't have to go through the same process. So, I was really keen to make sure that we could demonstrate really good career paths for, women in the wine industry. I work, as a viticulturalist, as I mentioned, and we make up about 10% of the team. And that number is in decline. So, being able to be seen is a really important component of that. And, making sure that, we have women reaching their full potential is really important. And in order to do that, I think, you need scaffolding and support sometimes. That might be mentoring. It might be sponsorship, opportunities around, professional development, all of that kind of thing. So, that was my goal and vision when I applied for the award.
Now, we tend to focus on the recognition and the excitement and even that little bit of fame and celebrity that comes with winning a Rural Women's Award, but it also comes with a lot of obligations and duties and demands on the winner, doesn't it? What was your experience like in the year that you held that title of National Rural Woman of the Year?
I think we need to think back. It was more than a decade ago. In fact, it was 13 years ago, and things have really changed a lot since then. There's been a lot of discourse, in the public around the role of women. And, back when I won, it was controversial, I'd have to say, probably within my, my peer group or within my agricultural sector. And really there was a bit of a backlash around, why do we need to celebrate the role of women? Why do they get, special treatment? So there was a bit of that, tall poppy syndrome.
So there was an imperative to prove yourself to the rest of the world that, yes, you really were worthy of the prize. Is that a common sort of sentiment among leading women?
I think we tend to be high achievers. And in doing so, we've had to continually prove ourselves in quite often, male-dominated industries. And, with that is quite often a relentless drive to have to keep on, doing more, doing better, and, lots of output and trying to, really succeed in male-dominated fields. So, part of that leads into, I think, that mentality of burnout to some degree. And what I found as I came out of that experience, which really lasted 18 months to 2 years, was that there was other state, kind of winners and national winners that were also having the same challenge. They were burning out really significantly. And there's a certain amount of shame about putting, your hand up to say, well, actually, I'm not coping that well. So, there were a number of women that were doing that in silence. And I recognised a need, to really reach out and support, those women.
Mary did speak up along with others, leading to the creation of the Rural Women's Award Advisory Panel. As we heard in our last episode, the coming together of like-minded, motivated women had been a key driver of change, so it was logical that the next step was creating formal networks and pathways so that these successes of the award winners weren't just one-offs.
They were really receptive to some of the suggestions about ways that we could put scaffolding in place to make sure, it wasn't just the focus on the winners, but we were providing a really strong alumni and support for all the women. So when they engaged in the award, they'd be really well supported. And there was a real focus on the alumni and how we could build, the capability of a broader range of women.
Jackie Wilson-Smith is a consultant, facilitator and a board director with several agri-food companies. In 2017, she was named the Queensland Rural Woman of the Year for her use of design thinking in reshaping the marketing of semi-dried herbs.
In layman's terms, it simply means just putting the people first, understanding the needs of the people and solving the problems of, when I say people, customers, solving the customers' problems first, putting them first. And the word really came about because it's come out of the School of Design. So if you were an architect, for instance, you don't just design a building without understanding how the building's going to be used. So thinking about the utility, what are the problems to solve from the people first. So that's the simplest way of thinking about design thinking.
And in practice, that means it's an iterative process, lots of back and forth.
It is an iterative process. So as a process, there are a few steps involved. So firstly, it's that observing and listening to your customers and really deeply looking for what their challenges and their pain points are with a product or a service or a situation. And then once you understand what the challenges and the pain points are from that customer point of view, then all fun stuff happens. So it's like then ideating to solve a problem, and that problem is of the customers. And then the iterative part comes about. Instead of going, oh, ta-da, here's the solution, here's a prototype. Let's see how we can test that prototype, and assuming from the get-go that you haven't got it right to start with. So you're creating a prototype, we're going to test it and see where it fails, see where it works, but where it fails, we'll continue to improve that through this iterative process. And so then eventually when you stop having failure points, the theory is at this point in time we're ready to launch.
So in talking about how you've applied it, you actually applied that design thinking when working with AgriFutures in establishing the alumni network. What sort of insights came out of the process?
Yeah, it's a great example, and it shows that you can use the design thinking principles of the process of innovation, not just for product innovation. You can also use it for a service innovation, which I guess in a way an alumni network is. We're providing a network which is a service for collaborating, mentoring and inspiring and all those things. So I was involved with a few others from the, at the time, the unofficial alumni in looking at designing, well, what would the Rural Women's Award alumni look like, and what are the pain points that need to be addressed, and what were some of the challenges that some of the past recipients of the Rural Women's Award had experienced. So we conducted some interviews and surveys, and it was quite consistent, and it revealed some genuine pain points, as well as the flip side of a challenge or an issue is that there's potentially going to be a great opportunity here if we can flip it and solve it. So some of the things were that we realised that many, not all, but many of the women who were the finalists and possibly the recipient of their national awards actually experienced various elements of burnout through that whole process, and possibly not having the support. And then we also discovered that many of the recipients who got to the finalists part, but then they may not have gone on, experience sort of, great deflation, or, well, what happens to my project now? Or, you sort of, everything's really special until that day, and then bang, it's out. And we also saw some pockets of the alumni happening organically with really great success, and then other areas where people had lost contact, and that was it. So it became clear that there was a real value in strengthening what was happening organically, and starting to address some of the challenges that the recipients of the award had shared. And so through that, we were able to design an alumni program that was all about, collaborating, supporting, inspiring, and it became a reason to be a part of the Rural Women's Award that was beyond just for the accolade of potentially winning.
Back at AgriFutures, Belinda Allett had more changes in store for the Rural Women's Award. Belle is now AgriFutures Chief Operating Officer, but when she first joined the organisation in 2016, she was General Manager of Capacity Building Programs, including the Rural Women's Award.
I think the purpose of the Rural Women's Award, has been to celebrate women who are leaders in their community and willing to put their hand up and lead, through community projects or whatever it might be. And I think that sort of purpose and that the essence of the award is still true today. I don't think that's actually changed that much. The one thing that I noticed was that, if we were wanting regional and rural Australia to be prosperous, then the women who are leading all of this work on the ground, why couldn't they also have part of that prosperity? And what I mean by that is financial prosperity. So when I took carriage of the awards, they were community projects, they were passion projects, very important ones. Communities are built on that, but they were unable to sort of commercially gain from their projects, and that just really logically sort of didn't make sense to me, because I just think the prosperity should be shared, and that these women should be able to reap the financial benefits, not just all the other benefits from their projects and the amount of time and effort that they are putting into. So that was just one key sort of change that Riddick holistically sort of looked at.
You also looked at some of the capacity building and support that those applicants and winners received. What did you change in that area?
Yeah, so every cohort gives us great feedback on sort of what they sort of go through as being like a state or territory winner. And really important that we listen to that feedback. And, early on, and as sort of the years went on, we got really good feedback around making sure that when the state and territory winners come together for the national judging, that they're prepared, they know what's in front of them in terms of like the gala dinner, what engagement with alumni looks like. So we really did build out the coming together. They come together for a week for a workshop, and we really have put a lot of effort over, the last sort of 8 years into making that sort of week that they come together really robust and really strong in terms of the extra learning and development and capacity building that they get around just outside of being the experts in their project.
Yeah, your predecessor, Edwina Close, she joked that it's the only award that you receive where your prize is to go and sit an exam for the AICD.
Yeah, so in addition to winning, they get a learning and development budget, which is outside the workshop that I just sort of talked about. And funnily enough, they can spend that money on whatever they want. But a lot of the women have selected to do the AICD course. It's not compulsory, but a lot of them naturally just, want to get that under their belts, and rightly so. And so, yeah, sitting that exam, I suppose, has become a bit of a next step for many of them, which has now allowed many of them to be sitting on boards and sitting in CEO roles. And, I think that's actually a really great story.
Was there a feeling among some of the women who had won or had been finalists that they weren't quite prepared for the amount of workload and the this feeling of being overwhelmed by the pressure of success. And what did you do to sort of change that dynamic for them?
Yeah, I think that many of them would say that they underestimated what was sort of involved. So really turning that involved into, a positive for me was really important.
As well as supporting the creation of the Rural Women's Award alumni networks in each state, Bell also connected the rural women's training activities with other capacity building programs like AgriFuture's Horizon Scholarships. The Horizon Scholarships are designed to support the next generation of leaders who are currently studying undergraduate degrees related to agriculture. The personal interaction between these groups created both a peer-to-peer and an intergenerational support network.
So the Rural Women's Award national finalists would come together on their own in the past. So 2017, they did it on their own. So 2018, we were like, why wouldn't we bring them together with the Horizon Scholars? Because we always bring the Horizon Scholars together for a week as well. And we were doing it sort of like a month apart, and it just didn't make sense to me. I was like, they could learn so much from one another. So the first year we did what we now call our summit. We just did it with Rural Women's Award and the Horizon Scholars first, and then we rolled it out into a bigger week where we also bring together many of our stakeholders from across our living and emerging industries and our rural futures sort of stakeholders, and also our global innovation network stakeholders. So just bringing everyone together, and what I call, we get this cross-pollination. So they've got their individual workshops and their individual activities, but there's very curated moments in that week where they're collaborating, or they're spending time together, or they're having dinner together. And that is just, widening all of their networks and, bringing them together for a bigger purpose, I suppose.
Bill, when you reflect on all of those summits that you've been a part of and the people who've participated in them, does anyone jump out as an example of really transforming and evolving and becoming more confident as a result of that training?
So many, all of them I could probably rattle off. But ones that jump to mind, and just really because it's probably timely, but Steph Schmidt from South Australia, she is a farmer out at World's End. And, just currently right now, South Australia is going through a really tough time, and she's a psychologist. And, I just have really found that she has found this confidence and a voice and a willingness to help other people, and that growth from just looking at sort of, her project and what she's doing, and actually being a spokesperson for mental health and various other elements. And just seeing the confidence in how she's able to project herself. And, it's just timely because, she's really active at the minute on social media, making some really important points. And every time I read one of her, posts, I think, oh my gosh, she's just come so far. Like, it's amazing. But there's, another, hundreds of examples like Steph.
Steph Schmidt won the 2020 South Australian Rural Women's Award, and between farming and family, she runs Farm Life Psych. In her application for the award, Steph proposed developing a series of in-person workshops for across South Australia for farmers and rural communities based on psychology, flexibility principles.
Practical strategies that we can all put in place every day to help us take care of our well-being, manage stress, manage uncertainty, all those inevitabilities almost in farming life. I was then part of the COVID cohorts, who I think about 5 days after I was announced as the South Australian winner, we went into lockdown in SA. And so I translated my program and my project to being an online project.
But why was an idea like that needed in the first place? What did you identify as that challenge in your communities that you thought, this is something that we need to address?
Yeah, so at the time I was working as a clinical psychologist, so seeing clients individually every day, also running a farm with my husband. And back in 2018 and 19, we were in incredibly severe drought. And what I was seeing was that as a psychologist, we were very rarely actually getting the farmers, farming men, farming women actually coming through the doors of seeing someone at the pointy end of that therapy space. And so I really wanted to develop something that gave farmers, farming communities the skills and capacity to manage the stress we face before we get to that pointy end of the scale, I guess. And so, yeah, it's been an interesting journey because I guess it developed following the 18-19 drought. And then for where I am in South Australia, we've never really come out of that. And now the last year or two within South Australia, it's now spread to be very severe across South Australia. And so my work has picked up again another level.
Culturally, we often think about, we have this stereotype of small rural communities as being tight-knit and very supportive. And this is true all around the world, the English village. But they're still full of all those same human dynamics, aren't they, which can be both positive and quite difficult to navigate on a micro scale.
Absolutely. And I think the catch is that you've got all of those different human dynamics, but instead being spread across 1,000 or 10,000 people, it's within 100 or a few hundred people. So there's a lot less people to provide the buffers, and everyone knows everyone, which is not always is both a good and a bad thing. It is definitely a double-edged sword, and I think it's something. Even going through the awards process is an interesting thing because not everyone in communities always understands that the funding of the award is for putting a big project into place. And so in the news they hear, oh, Steph just won $10,000, when it's not exactly the case. It's not just $10,000 going into your pocket. It's going into doing a whole lot of work for it.
In the same way that Steph was tackling isolation within small, connected communities, the new Rural Women's Award alumni networks were connecting a group of people with shared experiences of success, expectation, and sometimes feeling misunderstood, even in their own town.
I think that is really true. And especially, like, I was someone who grew up in Adelaide, so you're never quite a local. And yeah, the alumni just creates those connections, with, I guess it is kind of sometimes more like-minded, those other women that are striving for more, are striving to kind of create changes, or I guess most of us are people that are never quite happy just sitting and watching Netflix at night. We're always thinking up another idea of what we're going to get into.
Belle Allop says the influence of the alumni networks has continued to grow, with new pathways created for women just starting out on their journey of innovation to access the support and advice of the alumni.
Alex is really, the alumni want to be involved, they want to be active. And so to sort of put it into a state sort of environment and have a state chair to lead that connection, throughout the whole process, yes, to try and drive applications, but also to be there when the interviews are taking place, then to be there, to talk through the state, winner or state and territory winner through their next stage, and then to be there at the national gala. It's really just an exercise of community and having that community around the applicants and then the winners and then, all going through. But super powerful.
So tell me also a little bit about how you've broadened the program to bring in, with the accelerator grants, get more women involved, some of whom are just at the early stages of coming up with a bright idea or wanting to achieve something but don't quite know how just yet.
Yeah, and so by bringing in the acceleration grant was really sort of for two reasons. We know that you have to tap, a woman on the shoulder multiple times to get them to think about applying for the Rural Women's Award. It's not just something that people do naturally. And so the acceleration grant was about, don't worry about having a fully developed project, but you might have an idea and, you might think it's got legs and it may take off or it may not, but apply for the acceleration grant, come into the fold, of alumni and into the program, take your grant money, build it out and see if it's got legs, and then come back again, in a couple of years and apply for the main sort of award program. So it's really about people, just bringing them in earlier, but allowing them to be able to see what the program is all about, but also separately just giving them that money for that program to see if they can take their idea and turn it into a reality.
Among those giving back is Mary Retallick.
When I talk to, kind of winners that come through and runners up, I give them a little, kind of a reach out and just give them some advice and, make sure that they really enjoy, their time as a winner. Make it work for you. Setting personal boundaries, I think, is a really important one. Sometimes when you're used to as a mother or a leader in the industry, you give a lot of yourself. And, sometimes giving yourself the permission to rest is a really important part of that. And also, it's okay to say no. That's a pretty important lesson that I learned, and no's a complete sentence. But, if you're asked to do a lot of, speaking requests and you're just finding, you can't do it, that's a great opportunity to perhaps decline, but then offer that opportunity to someone else within the alumni, group that might not otherwise be given that opportunity, the runner-up or someone else, that would really enjoy that opportunity.
So the great irony about your focus on connection and generosity and support was that the project that you wanted to implement during your year as winner in 2012 was all about creating an online support network for women in wine. Never quite got finished in that year because of all the other obligations. Did it ever get completed, or has it manifested in a different form later on?
I think, again, I was probably a little bit ahead of my time, and I had these great ideas. I really pushed and pushed and pushed to try and seek external support and funding, and it just didn't materialise at that time. I developed a full website. I then, knew that there was an expectation of how to manage those networks and really bring it to fruition would take a lot of effort. I actually ended up getting a pretty chronic illness, which I'm still living with, which took a lot of my energy away. So I had to pull back at that time, but I'm so delighted to be able to kind of report that here we are 13 years later. There's been a real push for support in women in wine. We now have demonstrated career paths. We have strong networks. A lot of my vision has come to fruition with me leading from behind rather than from above. So I've always made myself available. I used to call it Friendly Fridays, and really just making myself available for any other woman that would like to have a chat. So I've done that, on a one-on-one basis, while I've also quietly pushed on the side to try and elevate women, the role of women, and to raise awareness. So that kind of method of leadership was probably a different one that I'd anticipated, but we're kind of making real headway now, which is great to see, and others have taken up the baton on that behalf.
But sometimes it takes a little patience for the talents to bear fruit. Here's Steph Schmidt again.
I'm kind of reflecting now 5 years on of going, okay, one, I wouldn't be here and all of the things that are rolling out if it wasn't for going through the awards process. But also things happen in the time that they need to happen. So, and that's something I've seen for so many of the other women as well. Like it might be the project that they went through the award with that 3, 5, 10 years on suddenly gets legs and grows. Or it might be a different project altogether, but they've still kind of had that capacity build up. Yeah, I think reflecting that when I look back now, 5 years ago with what did I have, a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old and a newborn, it probably wasn't ideal timing for the whole thing, but I'm glad I did apply for it.
Jackie Wilson-Smith has seen measurable change in the recognition of women and their ability to drive change in society. But there's still plenty more to be done.
You look at all of some of the headwinds that are holding women back. We've still got in many rural and regional areas, childcare services are still lacking. There's a digital divide still there. Mobile coverage in rural, regional areas is still to be improved. We've also got access to funding is still statistically harder for women. So there's still, it makes me realize that having the Rural Women's Award alumni and having that support network these are the sorts of things that can help us address and help us overcome some of those slightly unique headwinds that women have still got. So I think at this point it's still very relevant, but at the same time I'm very positive. I feel bright about the future.
So how would Belle and Mary sum up the Rural Women's Award now that it's reached this 25-year milestone?
To be as custodian of that of this program for a small period of time is, something that I'm really proud of. And I'm proud of the, enhancements. And I think they're enhancements because they weren't radical changes. They were, the awards program has always been really robust and really strong. But like everything, it needs to evolve. So to implement some of the enhancements that the AgriFutures board and management and team have made, is something that I am really proud of. And I think that it needs to continue to grow and continue to move with the times. And timing is everything as to when you make those changes. But yeah, I do have a really big sense of satisfaction and really proud to be part of the team that, has been the custodian of the award for a period of time.
I'd love to encourage any women that have thought about applying to do so. We're now in our 25th year. What a celebration. It's an amazing network of dynamic, fascinating women of substance and grit and determination and most of all, I'd say, put your hat in the ring and make the most of the opportunity, but have fun. The having fun stuff is pretty important too.
The Rural Women's Award is truly one of the great success stories of Australian agriculture. In our third and final episode on the Rural Women's Award, we take a step back and look at this transformation through the eyes of someone who's been there at the forefront of this fight for opportunity throughout her whole life. Farmer, businesswoman, community leader, politician, and now chair of the board of AgriFutures Australia, Cathy McGowan joins us for a special one-on-one interview to interrogate exactly how and why the Rural Women's Award has had such an impact. That's next time on Unearthed, the people changing Australian agriculture, a podcast brought to you by AgriFutures Australia.